So I want to ask you a question right at the top here. What is the exact price of a human soul?
Or an orc soul, for that matter.
Right, an orc soul. And what would it actually take for you to trade yours away without, a single second of hesitation?
It's a heavy question.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore this truly fascinating narrative document. It's titled Grom and the Deck of Many Things.
And the premise on the surface sounds like very classic high fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. You've got this battle-hardened adventuring party. They walk into a shady arcane bazaar carrying the body of their dead friend. And they walk out forever changed by an artifact of just absolute unadulterated chaos.
It's a premise that pulls you in immediately.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we only look at the statistical improbability of what happens with this artifact, we are missing the actual story.
Oh, totally.
The mechanics of the magic are just, well, they're just the framing device.
Exactly. We are not just cataloging magical mechanics today. We're putting the emotional dynamics of this specific party under a microscope.
Which is where the real meat of the source material is.
Right. We're going to unpack the crippling, suffocating weight of survivors' guilt, the genuinely terrifying lengths human and non-human beings will go to for the people they care about, and how a single artifact, the deck of many things, manages to strip these characters down to their absolute core truths.
We're talking about tearing off the psychological masks they wear, for society, for their friends, and for themselves.
It's intense.
It really acts as an emotional crucible. And the setting for this crucible is just phenomenally constructed by the author. It perfectly mirrors the internal state of the characters who are about to walk into it.
I want to transport you, the listener, there right now. Just close your eyes and imagine this place. It's called Bartholomew Goldfinger's Bazaar of the Extraordinary.
Great name.
So good. When this party walks in, the bell above the door doesn't chime cheerfully. The text explicitly says it gives a warped, echoing groan.
It's a tired, metallic sound. It belongs to places people only visit when they have run completely out of better options.
Right. The air inside is thick. You can smell heavy incense actively trying and failing to mask the scent of ozone and copper.
The smell of old magic and dried blood.
Yeah. There's this underlying atmosphere that is distinctly predatory. The shelves are sagging with objects that seem to vibrate, or even breathe when you aren't looking directly at them.
It's a space that actively defies the laws of nature, which sets the stage brilliantly for a party that is trying to defy the laws of life and death.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, the environment is communicating to the reader and to the characters that the normal rules of commerce, physics, and morality just do not apply here.
So into this heavy humming room walks Grom. Grom is a massive, battle-hardened orc, and he is carrying Zarak.
A shadow-touched high elf.
Right, who is unfortunately very recently deceased. And the contrast here is instantly striking. You have this orc whose entire existence, visually and historically, is defined by inherent violence and raw physical power.
But the narrative specifically notes the absolute tenderness with which he handles Zarek's body.
He doesn't just dump him on the counter. He lowers him with immense care, his massive hand lingering just long enough to adjust the elf's shoulder so that he maintains his dignity in death.
We really need to look closely at that visual shorthand. Grom is treating this body as something infinitely precious.
Yeah.
He refuses to let the violent nature of Zarek's death dictate how he is treated in the aftermath. It's an immediate signal that Grom is operating out of a profound sense of duty and attachment.
And waiting for them behind this cluttered counter is our merchant, Bartholomew Goldfinger. He is a tall, striped tabaxi.
Essentially a feline humanoid.
Yeah, with unblinking golden eyes. He moves slowly, deliberately. He looks at this heartbreaking scene, an orc holding a dead elf, and says, in a calm, almost bored voice, customers, and such dedicated ones.
He's completely unfazed.
He really is. He circles the body like a carrion bird evaluating a meal. He identifies Zarak as a rare, shadow-touched high elf.
Now, for those who might not know, being shadow-touched isn't just a cosmetic detail.
Right, it's a big deal in the lore.
Exactly. High elves are typically creatures attuned to light and nature. But being shadow-touched implies Zarak was, at some point in his life, exposed to the Shadowfell.
Which is a plane of existential gloom and death.
So his soul is already somewhat tethered to the dark. Bartholomew notes this, but then delivers the ultimate bad news. He tells Grom that Zarak's thread has been cut. Fate has filed the paperwork.
Filed the paperwork. From a clinical systemic perspective, Bartholomew represents the ultimate voice of universal equilibrium.
I mean, he isn't inherently evil in this moment, but he is utterly apathetic to mortal suffering.
He views the universe as a ledger, and Zarak's account has been closed.
Grom, predictably, rejects this.
Mm.
He demands that Bartholomew fix him, stating fiercely that he's seen Bartholomew sell miracles in the past.
Wait, I have to push back on that characterization of Bartholomew, though.
Oh,
Yeah, equilibrium implies fairness. Nothing about this space or what he's about to do to a grieving man feels fair to me.
It's fair.
Doesn't Bartholomew represent universal exploitation? He knows Grom is desperate, and his response to Grom's demand for a miracle is so chilling. He says, "I sell opportunities. Miracles are merely consequences with good marketing."
wow. It's a brilliant distinction. And to your point about exploitation, you're right. He is a capitalist of the arcane.
A capitalist of the arcane, I like that.
Consequences with good marketing completely strips the romance out of magic. He's telling Grom that every action has an equal, often devastating reaction.
And people just choose to ignore the devastation if they get what they want in the short term.
Exactly. Bartholomew tells Grom to let it go. He warns him that dragging the dead back disturbs things better left sleeping.
But Grom gets aggressive. He inches closer to the counter, his voice rumbling, saying Zarak followed him into hell, bled for him, and will not stay dead.
This is where I want to really dig into Grom's psychology.
Yeah, let's do it.
Is Grom doing this purely out of love for his friend? Or is he desperately, frantically trying to absolve his own crushing sense of guilt?
If we look at the behavioral indicators here, it leans heavily toward guilt.
Survivor's guilt is a powerful, destructive engine. It fundamentally rewrites a person's risk assessment.
We see this psychological pressure cooker play out instantly with the other members of the party. They act as a brilliant foil to Grom's tunnel vision. Let's look at Thea and Garlock.
Thea is the party's archer. She is quiet, strained.
The text says she follows them into the shop, silent as a thought one tries not to think.
What a line.
I know, right? Her fingers are hovering near her bow. Not because there is a physical enemy to shoot in this antique shop, but because holding that weapon is the only sensory input keeping her anchored to reality.
She tries to intervene. She steps forward, her voice soft and conflicted, and asks Grom if there's even a chance this bargain could hurt him.
And Grom's response is just a masterclass in emotional deflection. He doesn't even look at her. He just says, "Not your concern."
That's freezing cold.
Yeah. The text notes that the phrase lands much heavier than he intends, and Thea immediately stiffens and retreats behind a cold, safe exterior. She shuts down.
She's trying to protect him, to offer a lifeline, and he slams the door in her face.
Think about a time you tried to comfort someone in deep grief and they lashed out at you. It's exactly that dynamic.
The psychological shielding here is textbook. Grom cannot handle her care right now because he feels, fundamentally, that he doesn't deserve it.
If he accepts her comfort, he has to accept his own vulnerability, which he is currently using as fuel to stay angry.
This brings us to Garlock, the dwarf. If Thea is emotional suppression, Garlock is fatalistic pragmatism.
He removes his helmet out of respect for the dead, but he is a warrior through and through. He actively steps between Grom and the counter, acting as a physical barrier to stop the escalation.
Garlock tells Grom that he spent his whole life chasing a death worth having. He looks at Zarak's body and says Zarak met a quick end, fighting for a cause they all believed in.
That's a warrior's end. It's a good death. Garlock is basically saying, accept this. This is the occupational hazard of being an adventurer.
And that pragmatic acceptance is the spark that finally ignites the powder keg inside Grom. Grom yells, "He didn't choose it."
The room goes completely silent. The bell above the door stops its phantom swinging.
Grom's voice drops to a dangerous, jagged whisper, and he confesses to the room, "I did."
I did. It's a gut punch. Those two words recontextualize everything we've just witnessed.
It's not just that Grom failed to protect Zarak.
No, Grom made the tactical call, the leadership decision. That put Zarak in the crosshairs. He got his friend killed.
Bartholomew, ever the opportunist, hears this confession and smiles. He realizes he has a buyer whose desperation is no longer just circumstantial, but absolute and foundational.
He says, "Ah, so that's the story."
The merchant changes tactics instantly. He stops warning Grom.
He reaches beneath the counter into a space that the text specifically notes seemed deeper than it should be, as if he's reaching into another dimension entirely.
When his hand comes back up, he is holding the artifact. There is no fanfare, no glowing lights. A deck of black cards edged in gold just simply exists in his hand.
He introduces it as ancient, capricious, and utterly without mercy, the deck of many things.
Garlock's reaction is immediate, visceral terror. The fatalistic dwarf tenses up and flat out says no.
He knows the lore.
Every seasoned adventurer knows the stories of the deck. Kingdoms ruined overnight, souls lost to the void, men turned to dust or elevated to godhood in a heartbeat.
He begs Grom to understand that this isn't a weapon you can wield, it's just pure madness. To put this in perspective, drawing from this deck is the cosmic equivalent of playing Russian roulette.
But instead of a bullet in a chamber, you are loading the gun with the fundamental fabric of the universe.
You aren't just risking your life, you are risking your history, your future, and your existential footprint.
Bartholomew actually agrees with Garlock here. He says the deck doesn't grant wishes, it poorly rewrites destinies.
You draw from it, you gamble with everything, and Grom, without flinching, just stares at the deck and says, "Good, I draw."
But Bartholomew stops him. He says gold is fleeting and arcane trinkets are dull.
The price for this specific opportunity to tamper with a fate that has already filed its paperwork must be enduring.
He leans over the counter, looks Grom in the eyes, and demands his very soul as payment, just for the privilege of drawing the cards.
At this point, the party loses it. Thea's cold exterior shatters.
She grabs Grom's arm, screaming at him that he doesn't know what that means.
Yeah.
That a soul isn't just a concept, it's him.
Garlock yells that it's not a price, it's a grave with extra steps. They are in full-blown panic. And
Grom is perfectly calm.
he looks at Bartholomew and just says, "Done."
The pacing of that moment is incredible. It happens so fast that even the ancient unflappable tabaxi merchant pauses in genuine shock for a fraction of a second.
Grom doesn't barter. He doesn't think it over.
The guilt is so phenomenally heavy that his soul feels like a fair, almost cheap trade to alleviate it. He bought the ticket instantaneously.
And now he has to take the ride. The deck is fanned out in front of him on the counter. Grom, perhaps thinking he could just get this over with, asks if he just flips them all over at once.
And Bartholomew, recovering his composure and sounding almost amused by Grom's ignorance, says, "Oh no, one at a time. Let fate savor you."
Wow, let fate savor you. This brings us to the actual mechanics of the draws. The deck isn't just magic, it operates like a quantum probability engine.
It forces a localized collapse of reality based on the symbolic nature of the card drawn.
Grom reaches out. He hesitates for just a heartbeat, looks at Bartholomew, and pulls the first card.
The edge of the card immediately blackens. The surface rots in his hand.
The text describes a whisper passing through the room that isn't a sound but an absence. This is the Ruin card.
The manifestation of this card is brutal to visualize.
Instantly, Grom loses all his non-magical possessions, but it doesn't just fall off him into a pile on the floor. It fundamentally ceases to be.
It turns to dust.
His massive battle axe, the tool of his trade, vanishes. The heavy leather strapped across his chest unravel into nothingness. His armor, which has protected him through countless wars, collapses inward.
Even his rough-spun clothing dissolves into ash. In one merciless moment, Grom is stripped completely bare.
We need to analyze the psychological symbolism here. Grom has been emotionally stripped bare by his guilt and his confession just moments prior.
Now, the universe is literalizing that vulnerability. The Ruin card doesn't just destroy items. It targets the concept of ownership attached to Grom's metaphysical signature.
It erases his physical defenses, leaving him standing there, completely exposed, and yet his reaction is absolute stoicism.
He doesn't scramble to cover himself. He stands tall and buries the shame.
Think about how you would react if you're standing in a room with your friends and suddenly every layer of protection and dignity you had was just deleted from reality.
You'd probably panic, cover up, or scream.
Right. Grom just takes it. But the reactions of his friends are what really fascinated me here. Thea immediately turns away, flushed with horror.
She puts a hand over her mouth, unable to witness his humiliation.
But Garlock lets out a sharp, sudden bark of laughter. He wheezes, "That's one way to lighten your load, lad."
It's a brilliant juxtaposition of trauma responses.
Yeah, it really is.
Thea is overwhelmed by the extreme vulnerability of the moment. She is highly empathetic, and seeing Grom reduced this way hurts her.
Garlock, on the other hand, is faced with a terrifying cosmic power that just erased solid steel with a whisper.
His pragmatic, combat-oriented mind cannot process the absurdity of it, so his brain defaults to dark, inappropriate gallows humor.
It's a defense mechanism to keep from descending into sheer terror. It's the ultimate laugh so you don't cry response.
Grom snarls at Garlock, threatening to strangle the dwarf with his own beard if he laughs again.
The tension is razor sharp. Grom reaches out and draws his second card. This time, it's the Night card.
The oppressive smell of the antique shop is suddenly pierced by the scent of pine needles and cold, biting wind.
With a rush of displaced air, an orc woman suddenly appears in the room. She's tall, broad-shouldered, and looks completely disoriented. Her name is Olga.
Olga's entrance adds a fascinating layer of bureaucratic reality to the magic of the deck. The card didn't magically synthesize a person from thin air. It executed a complex cosmic contract. Olga explains angrily that she was sitting in a tavern, was tricked by an imp into breaking a wax seal on a parchment, which stole all her belongings and bound her to this summoner.
She is here against her will, bound by a debt to the card's magic. She is essentially a victim of magical identity theft, drafted into Grom's nightmare.
It's absurd, but it's consistent with the deck's rules.
What I love about Olga is her immediate agency. She assesses the situation, sees this massive naked orc glaring at a deck of cards, sees the dead elf on the counter, and without any grand ceremony, she takes off her heavy, fur-lined cloak and drapes it over Grom.
She pledges her axe and her strength to him, as the contract demands, but she does it with a gruff, practical respect.
It's a brief injection of pragmatic kindness in a room overflowing with chaos. She provides the physical cover that Grom refused to ask for.
Grom pulls the cloak tight around himself, simply says, "Stay close," and reaches for his third card.
This is where the narrative shifts from atmospheric tension to genuine existential threat. He draws the key.
As he holds the card, Grom feels something heavy and solid press against his side, appearing magically under the folds of Olga's cloak. He pulls it out.
It's a dagger, but the text gives this incredible description. The blade drinks the light, and its edge is thin as a whisper.
The ambient shadows in the bazaar literally bend and stretch toward the surface of the metal, as if it has a gravitational pull on darkness.
Bartholomew is visibly delighted by this draw. He leans forward and says the blade opens doors best left closed.
He cryptically tells Grom that if he kills with it, and his will is strong enough to dominate the weapon's hunger, what he slays might rise again, though not as it was.
We have to pause here because this is the ultimate twisted Chekhov's gun.
Oh, absolutely.
For anyone familiar with narrative structure, if you introduce a shadow-drinking, soul-altering dagger in Act 1, it absolutely must be used to stab the universe in Act 3.
You do not hand a desperate, guilt-ridden warrior a weapon that feeds on darkness, unless he is going to plunge it into something terrible.
From a magical theory standpoint, artifacts like this dagger are inherently corrupting. They require immense psychological dominance to wield without being consumed by them.
Grom has that willpower, fueled by his guilt, but he is now walking around with a radioactive piece of shadow magic.
Yet Grom doesn't hesitate. He doesn't ask for a manual. He just says, good, hides the dagger beneath the cloak, and draws his fourth card. The fourth card is Flames.
He turns it over, stares at it, and absolutely nothing happens in the room. No fire, no smoke.
Grom looks confused. Bartholomew, with that same terrifying calm, explains that somewhere in the vast infinite reaches of existence, a highly powerful devil has just taken a very personal interest in Grom and will not rest until he is dead.
Garlock, still desperately riding that wave of gallows humor to stay sane, just whistles and says, "Builds character."
While Garlock's comment is darkly funny, the Flames card fundamentally alters the stakes. It establishes a cosmic ticking clock.
Grom isn't just dealing with his internal guilt anymore. A literal supernatural predator is now actively hunting him across planes of existence.
The karmic debt of drawing from the deck is coming to collect, and that collection happens faster than anyone expects. Grom draws the fifth card.
The text says this card feels wrong the exact moment his fingers brush the paper.
It's physically cold, heavy, and carries a sense of finality. He turns it over. For the first time since entering the shop, Grom looks genuinely surprised.
He opens his mouth to speak, to give an order or curse fate, and he simply vanishes.
The description of his disappearance is chilling because of its restraint. There is no flash of light. There is no dramatic thunderclap or puff of smoke. He's just gone.
The universe deleted him from those coordinates. The card flutters gently to the floorboard.
The void card. His physical body is incapacitated somewhere, and his soul is violently ripped away and imprisoned in an extra-dimensional space.
The silence that follows in the bazaar is described as deep, crushing, and absolute.
Grom's physical removal from the room creates this massive emotional and atmospheric vacuum. And you know the old physics adage, nature abhors a vacuum.
In this case, Thea's carefully constructed emotional dam, all that silence and restraint she's been desperately holding on to, immediately rushes in to fill that void.
This is the exact moment Thea reaches her breaking point. The quiet, cautious archer completely shatters.
She lunges over the counter, physically assaulting Bartholomew, grabbing him by his fine robes and screaming, "What did you do to him?"
Her composure is entirely gone. The mask is off. She is frantic, operating purely on adrenaline and terror.
Bartholomew smoothly detaches her hands from his robes, entirely unharmed and unfazed. He clinically explains that Grom is in a prison beyond normal reach, an alternate plane where souls are kept in stasis or worse.
When Thea frantically demands to know how to find him, the merchant simply holds up the remaining deck of cards and says she can't, not without a wish.
It's the perfect predatory bait. He knows exactly what he is doing. He is leveraging her fresh grief to keep the game going.
Thea lunges for the deck, but Garlock, moving surprisingly fast for a dwarf in heavy armor, catches her wrist.
He tries to be the voice of reason again. He tells her she's just watched a man's life get systematically dismantled by these cards. He tells her this isn't a choice, it's suicide.
He asks her point blank if she really thinks drawing cards will fix this, or just add her corpse to the pile.
And here is where Thea's emotional suppression fully detonates. She tears free of Garlock's iron grip. She screams at him. He gave up his soul for us. And now I'm not losing him too.
She dives into the deck. What follows is a masterful, almost chaotic sequence showcasing the sheer duality of luck and the capriciousness of fate.
We have to look at the draws Thea and Garlock make side by side, because it plays out like a pitch-black comedy.
Let's analyze Thea first. She draws reckless, rapid, and desperate. She pulls the sun card. A blinding, searing light fills the dingy room, and as it fades, she gains a heavy, magical amulet.
The amulet allows her to locate the one she seeks. She immediately names Grom, and her consciousness is violently ripped away from the shop.
She hallucinates a distant, jagged, freezing mountain range. Deep within it, she senses a flicker of Grom's soul, completely alone and trapped. She snaps back to reality, gasping, realizing he's incredibly far away and she has to physically get there.
Garlock sees this flash of light and the amulet, and he basically shrugs and says, "Well, if you're going to be stupid and play with the universe, I might as well try my luck too."
He steps up and draws the gem card. Instantly, a literal waterfall of glittering jewels, rubies, sapphires, and diamonds spills out of thin air, crashing onto the wooden floorboards at his feet.
Garlock looks down at this king's ransom, blinks his eyes, and asks Bartholomew, "I can keep these."
The juxtaposition is absurd and brilliant. Thea is hyperventilating over her lost love, her mind stretched across continents.
And Garlock just hit the cosmic jackpot. He grins, kicking a ruby the size of an apple, and says, "Not the worst gamble I've made."
It's like watching two people at a casino. One is playing the slot machine at 3 a.m., completely dead inside, pulling the lever because she cannot accept that she's already bankrupt.
And the guy next to her accidentally drops a quarter and wins $1 million.
Thea is spiraling. She draws the Fool card. She loses a fraction of her intellect, tosses the card aside. She draws the Jester, tosses it.
She is frantically burning through fate, completely ignoring the consequences, just trying to find a wish. Her risk assessment is completely offline.
Then she draws the Uriel card. Bartholomew actually attempts to warn her here. He starts saying, "You are..."
And Thea, without even looking up, literally snaps, "Don't care," before he can finish his sentence.
Bartholomew rolls his golden eyes and finishes cursed. A heavy magical curse settles over her, a permanent penalty to her saving throws, making her incredibly vulnerable to magic.
She doesn't even flinch. Her tunnel vision is absolute. The curse is entirely irrelevant compared to the goal of getting Grom back.
Garlock, watching her systematically doom herself, shoves past her, swearing loudly. He says, "My turn before you doom us all to the abyss." He draws the throne card.
The card transforms in his hand into a heavy, wax-sealed parchment. It's a legal deed.
Garlock stares at the intricate writing and deadpans, "I own a castle now." Well, that's new.
If we synthesize this scene, what is the text telling us? We have Thea accepting devastating permanent curses to save the man she loves, standing right next to Garlock, who is standing knee-deep in a pile of priceless jewels, holding the deed to a fortified stronghold.
The deck of many things representing the universe does not care about their grief.
It hands out immense generational wealth and profound soul-crushing tragedy in the exact same breath. It is the ultimate proof of an uncaring cosmos.
It's staggering. And then finally, Thea draws the moon card. The card begins to tremble in her hand, pooling with liquid silver light that drips onto the floor.
Bartholomew goes perfectly, terrifyingly still. He whispers that she holds enough raw power for a wish. The universe is listening.
Thea doesn't hesitate, but she doesn't wish to be teleported to Grom. She doesn't wish to instantly free his soul from the void.
She remembers why they're in this shop to begin with. She honors Grom's original sacrifice.
She looks Bartholomew dead in the eye and says, "I wish for Zarek to be alive again."
The execution of this wish is where the narrative shifts from high fantasy into visceral body horror. Zarek's resurrection is not a fairy tale.
No, it's really not.
He doesn't wake up with a soft sigh like Sleeping Beauty. When the magic takes hold, Zarek surges upright on the counter with a strangled, wet gasp, the air literally slamming back into his deflated lungs.
He is immediately screaming, "No! Get off!"
It's terrifying. He is thrashing wildly, knocking over arcane scales and inkwells. His hands are frantically clawing at his own chest.
Because, as we find out, Zarek didn't just die of old age. A lich, an undead, immortal wizard fueled by dark magic, recently ripped Zarek's heart out of his chest during their last battle.
Zarek's last conscious memory is the sheer agony and violation of having his heart physically removed by a monster.
The psychological and physiological trauma he is experiencing in this moment is immense.
He was dead. His shadow-touched soul was lingering in the dark, and now he has been forcefully, violently yanked back into a living, breathing body that remembers being mutilated.
Thea and Garlock have to physically rush him, pinning him down on the counter, trying to ground him. They are shouting that he's safe, that he's among friends, trying to pull him out of a PTSD flashback.
He's hyperventilating, his hands desperately searching for a gaping chest wound that the magic has seamlessly closed.
It takes him several long, agonizing minutes to orient himself. And then comes the most bitter, heartbreaking irony of this entire narrative. Zarek's breathing slows. He realizes where he is.
He realizes Thea and Garlock are alive.
He looks around the shop, his eyes darting from face to face, and his very first question, the absolute first thing he cares about after returning from the dead, is, "Where is Grom?"
That line cuts clean through the joy of the resurrection. The relief in the room evaporates instantly.
Everyone freezes. Thea chokes on a sob. Garlock looks away.
They slowly turn to Bartholomew, who has just been silently watching this incredibly messy human drama unfold from behind his counter.
And the tabaxi, with no malice but no empathy either, calmly delivers the punchline to this cosmic joke. He is in the underworld.
So we now have a fractured narrative, a completely split reality.
On one side, we have Thea, Garlock, the newly summoned orc warrior Olga, and a deeply traumatized Zarek heading out of the shop and into a freezing, jagged mountain range to find the physical entrance to the underworld that Thea saw in her vision.
On the other side, Grom wakes up in the sweltering, claustrophobic depths of hell itself.
These parallel journeys act as dual crucibles for the characters, pushing them to their absolute physical, psychological, and spiritual limits.
Let's analyze the ascent first. The party leaves the bizarre, contained environment of the antique shop and begins a brutal, punishing climb up the mountains, guided only by the glowing heat of Thea's amulet.
The sensory shift the author employs here is massive. We go from a dusty, incense-filled, enclosed room to the oppressive, expansive silence of a high-altitude mountain range battered by freezing wind.
And Thea's tunnel vision, which we saw begin during the card draws, completely takes over her personality.
She turns into an absolute machine. She walks ahead of the group, her eyes fixed on the glowing amulet, ignoring the cold, ignoring the terrain.
At one point, on the first day of the climb, Garlock, who is a sturdy dwarf accustomed to hardship, begs for them to make camp.
He points out that Olga is still disoriented, Zarek is literally shivering from post-resurrection shock, and they're all battered, bleeding, and freezing. He says they need a fire and sleep.
Thea doesn't even turn around. She just calls back over her shoulder, "Then rest. I'm not stopping till I find Grom."
She is fueled purely by desperation, guilt, and adrenaline.
It's a classic trauma response. If she stops moving, she has to actually feel the cold, and more importantly, she has to feel the reality of what she allowed to happen to Grom.
What's deeply compelling during this climb, however, is Zarek's subtle character shift. He is unusually quiet, highly observant, and clearly fundamentally changed by his time in the afterlife.
There's a specific haunting scene on the first night where the group finally forces Thea to stop. The storm is howling around them, and Garlock is cursing because he cannot get a campfire started. The wind and sleet keep snuffing out his sparks.
They are facing severe hypothermia, and Zarek steps forward. He holds out his pale hand, murmurs an incantation, and summons a small, quiet, magical flame.
He doesn't look at the others. He just stares deeply into the fire, his eyes reflecting the light, and he says something incredibly profound.
He whispers, "It's quieter. The dark. It's farther away."
We really need to unpack the weight of that statement. Zarek hasn't just returned to life. He has brought a piece of the void back with him in his shadow-touched soul.
He isn't just cold from the mountain air. He is intimate, permanently acquainted with the absolute absence of life and light.
When he looks at that magical fire, it isn't just warming his frozen hands. It's actively pushing back a cosmic existential darkness that he now fundamentally understands on a soul-deep level.
He is traumatized by the cold of the grave.
Exactly. The magic fire is a psychological anchor for him. And the mountain itself seems to recognize that they don't belong there. It actively fights them.
On the second day of the ascent, there's an avalanche. It's not a slow buildup. It happens in an instant. A crack like thunder and a wall of white death descends on them.
Zarek's reflexes kick in. He actually manages to grab Garlock's heavy armor and drag the dwarf behind a massive rock outcropping, saving his life.
Olga manages to anchor herself with her axe. But Thea, who was walking out in front, gets swept away and buried under tons of snow.
And again, Zarek's connection to the other side proves crucial here. When the snow settles into an eerie silence and Thea is gone, Zarek doesn't panic.
He closes his eyes, focuses his shadow magic, and points directly at a seemingly random patch of snow. He can sense her fading life force.
They dig frantically, their hands bleeding from the ice, their breath ragged in the thin air. They pull her out.
She is gasping, choking, coughing up packed snow from her lungs. She is on the verge of suffocating. Garlock is trying to assess her injuries, and what does Thea do?
The very first thing she says, while still coughing up ice, is, "I'm fine."
She staggers to her feet, grabs the amulet, and immediately resumes walking up the incline. It is pure madness. She is practically dying of exposure, and she will not stop.
Thea is burying her trauma under physical exhaustion on the mountain. But Grom doesn't have the luxury of physical exhaustion. His punishment is entirely claustrophobic.
If the mountain is freezing, expansive, blindingly white, and indifferent, hell is sweltering, confining, dark, and actively malicious. Let's look at the descent.
Grom wakes up in the underworld, and the environmental design here is deeply, viscerally unsettling.
The ground beneath his boots isn't stone. It's described as uneven, dark, and strangely soft in places, as if it remembered something it should not. It feels like walking on petrified flesh.
The air is unimaginably heavy, pressing hot against Grom's lungs like a physical weight. The architecture is a nightmare landscape designed to break the mind.
The walls form twisting, nonsensical corridors made of convex towers, and jutting out from these towers are massive iron spikes with decaying corpses impaled on them.
But they aren't all dead. Some of them are still weakly breathing, twitching. Blood is literally dripping down from the ceiling onto Grom's bare shoulders. It is sensory overload designed to induce despair.
And Grom doesn't have time to process it because he is immediately hunted. First, by a massive hellhound with eyes burning like coals, forcing Grom to sprint blindly through this shifting, confusing maze of flesh and iron.
But the hound is just the appetizer, a tool to flesh him out.
Right, because we cannot forget the Flames card. That powerful devil that took a personal interest in him. It finally arrives to collect.
It drops from the dark sky above, a towering, terrifying figure with leathery wings and curved horns. It wields a massive spiked chain in one hand and a heavy, jagged cleaver in the other.
It lands in front of Grom, smiling, and taunts him, saying, "It's time to die, orc."
The devil strikes instantly. The spiked chain lashes out like a snake, wrapping around Grom's ankle and violently ripping his massive frame off his feet.
The cleaver comes down in a lethal arc. Grom, operating purely on ingrained combat survival instinct, kicks frantically, tears his ankle free of the spikes, leaving blood behind, rolls away from the cleaver, and scrambles for any possible escape route.
And the escape route he finds is arguably worse than the fight. He spots a narrow fissure, an opening in the wall of rock and pulsing flesh, and he forces his large body into it.
He is dragging himself through a violently tight crawl space. His broad, muscular shoulders are actively scraping against the jagged stone. He is pinned in total darkness.
It's a powerful metaphor. It's like being swallowed alive by the earth, returning to the wound of the world only to find it hostile. It perfectly mirrors the suffocating nature of his guilt.
I felt panicked just reading that section, and the devil doesn't even bother to pursue him immediately. It knows it has him trapped. It plays with its food.
It stands outside the opening, slowly, methodically scraping its massive claws against the stone, sending vibrations through the rock into Grom's bones.
It speaks into the fissure, telling Grom he can run, he can struggle, he can bleed, but he cannot leave. The devil is savoring the psychological torture just as much as the physical hunt.
But Grom refuses to break. He just keeps pushing forward, inch by painful inch, through the pitch black, his hand tightly clutching that shadow-drinking dagger he got from the keycard.
He is moving toward the inevitable, which brings us to the simultaneous, explosive climax of both storylines. Grom reaches the end of the crawl space, and the party simultaneously reaches the peak of the mountain. Let's look at Grom's stand first.
Grom finally tumbles out of the suffocating crawl space and falls into a massive, cavernous chamber.
But as his eyes adjust to the dim red light, the true horror of the room is revealed. The walls aren't stone, they are pulsing with trapped souls.
Pale, ethereal forms are half emerged from the rock, their faces twisted in silent, agonizing screams. Thousands of them.
They are reaching outward with phantom limbs, begging for release, begging for help. Grom realizes this isn't just a cave, this is a containment unit. This is where the souls of the damned are kept as fuel.
It's an overwhelming sight, but Grom doesn't have time to pity them. The devil shatters the stone wall behind him, forcing its massive frame into the cavern.
It's arrogant, highly amused. It mockingly commends Grom for making it this far, noting that surviving the run means Grom's soul is strong, which means he will suffer beautifully.
And here, in this impossible situation, is where Grom demonstrates his absolute tactical brilliance and sheer stubborn willpower. He doesn't cower. He doesn't look for another tunnel. He stops running.
It is the most hardcore thing imaginable. When the devil strikes with the spiked chain again, aiming to maim him, Grom doesn't dodge away, he steps into the attack.
He raises his arm and intentionally allows the heavy chain to wrap around his forearm. He lets the demonic spikes bite deep into his own flesh, tearing his muscle, specifically to use his own body as an anchor to lock the devil in place.
He weaponizes his own pain. By taking the hit, he removes the devil's reach advantage and tethers the creature to him.
And with the devil momentarily anchored and surprised by this suicidal tactic, Grom drives that shadow dagger forward. The blade strikes true, sinking into the devil's chest.
But it's not a normal wound. The shadows in the cavern literally explode toward the blade. The dagger, true to its description, begins frantically feeding on the devil's dark essence.
And because the dagger is fundamentally a tool of supreme shadow magic, its sudden, violent hunger acts like a tuning fork.
It awakens the trapped souls embedded in the walls. They sense a shift in the hierarchy of power. They start reacting to the blade, twisting in the stone, their silent screams turning into a low, rumbling hum.
They reach their phantom hands toward the dagger. Grom realizes what he holds. He realizes what Bartholomew meant by opening doors best left closed.
He doesn't just stab the devil, he fundamentally breaks the structural rules of the underworld. He looks at the thousands of trapped souls, his voice echoing with the power of the blade, and growls, "Get up! I'm not doing this alone."
He is literally using hell's own dark tools to rally the dead against their captors. It is an unbelievably triumphant, paradigm-shifting moment. He turns his guilt into a crusade.
Meanwhile, miles above him in the material plane, on the snowy plateau, the party is having a desperate stand of their own.
They finally reach a massive dark cave opening at the summit. The amulet on Thea's chest is burning blisteringly hot. They know Grom is close, or at least the dimensional doorway to where he is trapped is inside this cave.
But the mountain ecosystem isn't done with them. The snow at the mouth of the massive cave literally erupts outward. The mountain seems to crack open, and a towering frost giant pulls itself free from the ice.
Now, for those not steeped in this lore, we aren't talking about a big guy covered in snow. A frost giant is essentially a walking natural disaster, a primal elemental force of nature that treats mortals the way we treat ants.
It glares down at them, its breath creating a blizzard, and declares them intruders and more souls to freeze.
Tactically, the party is completely outmatched. Olga, the summoned orc, is already injured from the climb. Garlock is exhausted and barely standing in his heavy armor.
Thea is bleeding, concussed from the avalanche and running on fumes, and a 30-foot frost giant is raising a magical club made of solid, unbreakable ice to crush them flat.
And this exact second of impending doom is where Zarak executes what might be the most absurd, genius play in the history of arcane magic.
Zarak still has access to highly potent magic, lingering from the wish spell that brought him back via the moon card.
Quickly runs through his combat spells in his head, realizes none of them will stop a giant in time, and in a moment of pure, exhausted desperation, he closes his eyes, taps into the weave of magic, and says aloud, "I could really go for a cup of hot tea."
It is the ultimate tension breaker. The wish magic, which is designed to alter reality to fulfill a desire, executes the command literally. It forces a localized psychological shift.
The giant pauses, mid-swing. The rage drains out of its face. It lowers its massive ice club, looks confused, mutters the word T in a voice that shakes the ground, and literally turns around and wanders back into the dark depths of the cave to go find a kettle.
Garlock just collapses onto his back in the snow, groans at the sky, and says, "I hate magic."
It's a hilarious stalling tactic, but if you look deeper, it highlights Zarak's fractured psychological state.
Faced with a towering monster and immediate violent death for the second time in a week, his traumatized mind defaults to the most basic, comforting domestic desire imaginable: a hot cup of tea.
She just wants peace. And that bizarre wish buys them exactly the few minutes they need.
With the giant temporarily distracted by a magical craving, Thea pushes forward into the antechamber of the cave. She finds a circle of ancient, rune-carved stones covered in thick ice.
Garlock drags himself up, swings his axe, and shatters the ice, revealing a dark threshold beneath. But as the text notes, it's not a normal portal or a door.
Olga, tapping into her ancestral knowledge, looks at it and calls it a wound in the fabric of the world.
Thea kneels down in the snow and places her bare hand on the frozen stone. She starts speaking words she doesn't know, words that seem to bleed out of the amulet, tapping into something ancient and primal.
She forces the edges of the threshold open with her sheer will. The doorway cracks open and darkness pours out into the snow.
And this isn't just an absence of light. It's described as something thicker, something that moves with a sluggish, hateful intent.
And heat pours out. A consuming, dark heat, smelling of sulfur and rot. They are staring down into a vast, endless, vertical descent, catching glimpses of twisted shapes moving in the red distance.
And in the background, echoing from deep within the cave behind them, they hear a low, slow rumble. The frost giant's massive footsteps are returning.
The magic has worn off. Tea time is over.
We are out of time.
Thea stands up at the very edge of hell. She's bleeding, freezing, cursed by fate, and utterly exhausted. She looks at her friends, a pragmatic dwarf, a summoned warrior, and an elf carrying the trauma of the grave, and simply says, "Let's bring him back."
And one by one, without hesitation, they step off the edge of the world and into the dark. It's an incredible cliffhanger that leaves you breathless.
If we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, what we've witnessed is a profound systemic transformation of these individuals.
The deck of many things didn't destroy this party. It acted as a brutal, necessary catalyst. It burned away all their societal pretenses, all their coping mechanisms, and forced them to stop hiding their true natures.
Absolutely. Grom couldn't hide his survivor's guilt behind a wall of stoicism anymore. He was forced to literally sell his soul and face his demons to try and fix his mistake.
Thea couldn't hide her fierce devotion to Grom behind a quiet, cautious exterior. She accepted a magical curse and marched headlong into hell for him.
Garlock couldn't hide his unwavering loyalty beneath his cynical, fatalistic pragmatism. He followed them anyway.
And Zarak couldn't hide from the dark, terrifying reality of his second chance at life. They were all stripped bare, metaphorically and literally, and what remained at the core was pure, undeniable purpose.
It's a beautiful character study, but it leaves us with a fascinating, terrifying, cosmic dilemma. Bartholomew warned them earlier that fate hates being corrected. The universe thrives on order.
Fate had filed the paperwork on Zarak, and Grom tore it up. Fate tried to claim Grom's soul, and Grom is actively fighting back.
Which brings me back to the thought I want to leave you with today in this deep dive. We know Grom is currently in the depths of the underworld. He is holding a shadow dagger, and he is actively using it to rally the countless souls of the damned against their demonic captors.
He is staging a massive prison break in the middle of hell.
So I ask you, what happens to the balance of the entire universe when a mortal decides to completely rewrite the rules of hell using hell's own dark tools? If the deck of many things represents the ultimate gamble, who comes to collect when the cosmic ledger is suddenly that far in the red? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the vast, chaotic narratives hidden in your own sources, and we'll see you next time.